I'm sorry, but this one just doesn't want a home. The volunteer's voice cracked as she closed the clipboard, her tone more defeated than angry. Through the mesh of the kennel gate, the dog didn't flinch. He lay motionless, muzzled, tucked over his scarred front paw, eyes fixed on nothing in particular. The light in his gaze, what little of it remained, was glassy, dimmed by something that no treat or coaxing voice had managed to reach. His name was Cole, lanky, and almost wolf-like in the way his ears stayed high, alert, even in stillness. Shelter staff had tried everything: tennis balls, gentle fosters, patient older couples, even kids with backpacks full of toys. Cole refused them all. Every time a hand reached through the bars, he would retreat to the corner, not with fear, not with aggression, just refusal, quiet and final. That morning the rain hadn't stopped since dawn. It came down in a cold, deliberate rhythm that drummed softly on the corrugated roof of the shelter. The air inside smelled of bleach and wet. Fur rows of kennels echoed with barks, whines, and the occasional nervous scratch of claws on concrete. But near the end of the corridor, where Cole's run sat half-shadowed under a flickering bulb, there was only silence, until the girl arrived. "Is this where they are?" she asked, her voice careful, as though she didn't want to disturb something. Fragile, she stood at the reception counter, one hand gripping a folded cane, the other loosely hooked in her father's arm. Her name was Elise, 11 years old, with straight ash-blonde hair cut blunt above her shoulders. Her eyes, pale and unfocused, flicked toward the sounds, a yelp here, a bark there, as if trying to draw a picture from noise. Her father looked tired, not in the way that comes from lack of sleep, but from years of quiet carrying. His name was Nolan, a former music teacher who now worked night shifts to cover the extra medical bills. His hands, still calloused from years of piano, rested gently on her shoulders as they followed the volunteer down the corridor. Elise paused in front of every kennel, listening more than looking. Her hand would drift toward the bars when a dog barked excitedly or whimpered for attention, but after a minute or two she would shake her head and move on. Too loud, she whispered once, too nervous another time. Then she stopped, mid-step, her hand shot out, brushing the chain-link gate of Kennel 19. Cole didn't lift his head. The volunteer was already turning away. "Oh, don't bother with that one," she said flatly. "He won't even come near anyone." It's like he gave up on people a long time ago, but Elise wasn't listening. Her hand stayed against the gate, fingers trailing down the cold metal, as though it told her something words never could. "There's someone in there," she said softly. Nolan looked through the bars. "You mean the dog?" She nodded. "He's not barking, he's not scared, he's just ... waiting." And then, for the first time in nearly 6 months, Cole moved. Not much, just a subtle lifting of his chin, the twitch of a single ear. But it was enough to draw Nolan's breath sharp. Cole's eyes locked on Elise like he understood something unspoken. Something that had nothing to do with vision, or touch, or food. Something older. The volunteer frowned. "That's weird. He never..." "Can I go in?" Elise asked, already unfolding her cane. The request stunned everyone into silence. Nolan glanced toward the staff, hesitant. "Are you sure, sweetheart? He's a big dog. And he doesn't exactly..." "He's not going to hurt me," she said, stepping closer. "He doesn't sound like a dog that bites." That sentence, "he doesn't sound like a dog that bites," hung in the air like a key in a lock no one had noticed until now. They opened the gate, slowly, quietly. Elise stepped inside. Cole didn't move. His breathing had changed, deeper, now, more deliberate. His body tensed, not with fear, but with attention. She crouched down a few feet away, resting her hands on her knees. For a long minute they simply sat like that girl and dog, one blind and searching, the other broken and withdrawn. Then, without a sound, Cole stood, stretched one paw forward, then another, and walked not toward the door, not toward the food dish, but directly to her. Step by slow, deliberate step, until his nose rested gently against her palm. Elise smiled. "I knew you were waiting." And outside, unnoticed by anyone, the rain finally began to slow, not quite stopping, not yet, but softening. As if something heavier had been lifted, just a little. The room was silent, except for the faint creak of the kennel gate as it clicked shut behind them. Cole pressed his muzzle against Elise's hand and held it there, unmoving, as if memorizing something. The girl didn't flinch. Her fingers curled slightly, stroking the rough patch of fur along his snout, brushing over the thin scar that cut just below his eye. Nolan watched from the doorway, arms crossed tightly over his chest. He didn't trust it, not yet. Cole was still a mystery, all jagged edges and unreadable stillness. And Elise, she had only just begun to emerge from the quiet shell the last year had forced around her. He wasn't ready to see that shell shattered again. But when Cole leaned in closer and rested his head in her lap, something in Nolan's chest shifted. Not trust, not yet, but maybe the first thread of it. "He's heavier than he sounds," Elise said, her voice light with something dangerously close to laughter. The volunteer blinked. "He's never let anyone touch him like that. Not even us." Elise didn't seem surprised. Her hand moved slowly down Cole's neck, tracing the sharp angles of a dog who had gone too long without warmth. "He doesn't want to be touched by someone who wants to own him," she said plainly. "That's different." The words echoed in the stale air like a truth no one had dared speak. By the next morning, the paperwork was signed. Cole went home with them in a second-hand SUV with a cracked windshield and the faint smell of spilled coffee. He didn't bark. He didn't pant or whine. He sat in the back seat, upright eyes fixed on the road, like a soldier returning from something too long and too deep to name. At home, Elise showed him every corner of the small two-bedroom rental they called theirs. She guided him with her voice, soft, deliberate, and he followed like he'd done it 100 times in another life. Kitchen, hallway, her room, with a low mattress and shelves filled with braille-labeled books and music boxes that didn't always work right. Cole didn't sniff or wonder. He simply observed, tail low but steady. When Elise sat on the floor by her window and patted the rug beside her, he folded himself down without hesitation. Nolan watched from the doorway, arms crossed again. His instinct still whispered caution. This bond, sudden, intense, didn't make sense, not logically. And Elise was fragile in ways few people could understand. She'd stopped smiling after the accident, stopped asking questions, started waking up from dreams she couldn't explain. For a while, Nolan had feared the quiet would consume her, but now she talked to Cole about everything. Her favorite songs, the funny way people's shoes sounded different on sidewalks, the smell of thunderstorms and the shape of shadows. She could feel but not see, and Cole listened, or at least, he stayed close, ears twitching, breath slow, present still. Something unsettled Nolan. That dog wasn't just quiet, he was watchful, like he was waiting for something, or someone. The twist came on the fourth night. It was nearly 3 a.m. when Nolan jolted awake to the sound of growling, low, guttural, not threatening but warning. He reached instinctively for the flashlight he kept by the bed. The house was dark, still, too still. Then the sound came again, closer this time. Nolan pulled on his robe and moved quietly down the hall. Elise's door was cracked open. The glow of her nightlight cast a dim oval on the carpet, and Cole stood between her bed and the window, completely still, ears back, body taut, growling. Elise. Nolan whispered. She stirred but didn't wake. Her arm was curled under her cheek, face calm. Cole didn't turn when Nolan entered. His eyes were locked on the window. Nolan followed his gaze and felt his stomach drop. The curtain moved, just barely, but the window was closed. Nolan stepped forward and pulled it open, scanning the backyard with a flashlight beam. Nothing. No footprints, no sound, just trees, and the wind moving through them like breath through clenched teeth. He looked back at Cole. The dog had stopped growling but remained alert, watching, waiting. Nolan double-checked the locks, stayed up another hour pacing the living room. The next morning, when he asked Elise if she heard anything strange in the night, she tilted her head. "I had a dream," she said softly. "A man was standing outside. I couldn't see him, but I knew he was there. He smelled like smoke and metal." Nolan said nothing, but the hair on the back of his neck stood up. That day he installed new locks, reinforced the back door. Cole paced the house more than usual, never straying far from Elise. Every sudden noise sent his head up. Every shadow made him tense. Elise noticed too. "He's guarding something," she murmured, tracing his ear with a fingertip. "But I don't think it's the house." Later that evening, Nolan sat at the kitchen table, flipping through Cole's adoption paperwork. He hadn't paid much attention before. He'd been too focused on Elise, but now he read every line. Found in a ditch. No microchip. Signs of previous abuse. Multiple failed adoptions. One note, hastily scribbled in the margin by a former handler. Reacts strongly to uniforms. Once attacked a man in paramilitary gear. No explanation. Nolan closed the folder. Slowly, his eyes drifted to the hallway, where Cole lay with his head resting across Elise's feet. A question had begun to form in his mind, unsettling and sharp. What had Cole seen before he came to them? And more urgently, was, whatever it was, still out there? The wind had changed. It was subtle, the kind of shift most people wouldn't notice, but Cole did. He'd been pacing near the back door for nearly half an hour now. Nose low to the floor, body tight. Every few seconds, he'd lift his head and stare through the glass, not with curiosity, but certainty. Something was out there. Elise sat cross-legged, in the living room, tracing the edges of her music box. It had once played a lullaby, but now the tune came in jagged stutters, warped and off-key. She didn't seem to mind. Her other hand rested on Cole's old leather leash, coiled neatly beside her like a lifeline. She never asked for it, she just liked having it nearby. Even inside the house, Nolan stood in the kitchen staring blankly at the stove. A pot of pasta was boiling over, steam curling into the air like smoke, but he didn't move. His thoughts were somewhere else, back in the shelter, back to the moment Cole had laid his head in Elise's lap. He kept circling that memory, looking for something he might have missed, something that could explain why a dog like that, rejected, reactive, written off as dangerous, would instantly choose her. The knock on the door wasn't loud. It was just 3 sharp raps, deliberate, spaced perfectly apart. Cole's head shot up, a low growl rumbling deep in his chest before the sound had fully faded. Elise stilled. Nolan wiped his hands on a towel and approached the door slowly. Glancing at the time, Almost 9 p.m. Too late for a package. Too early for anything good. When he opened the door, no one was there. Only an envelope, no markings, no return address. Just his name written in block letters on the front. Not Elise's name. Not occupant. Just Nolan. He picked it up, heart beginning to drum faster. Cole pushed past his legs, nose to the floor, sniffing along the edges of the threshold before freezing. His ears flattened. "Get inside," Nolan said sharply, his voice tight. Back in the living room. He opened the envelope carefully. It wasn't a letter. It was a photograph, black and white, blurry but unmistakable. Cole, on a chain, but not in a kennel, not even at the shelter. The background was unfamiliar. Dirt floor, a rusted oil drum, part of a fence topped with barbed wire. Cole's head was lowered, his ribs visible, and in the corner of the image, a boot, military issue worn, and nearby the edge of a duffel bag with a partially visible insignia, a winged badge. Nolan flipped the photo over. On the back, someone had scrawled a single line in black ink. "You have something that doesn't belong to you." His breath caught. Slowly, he looked up at Elise, still sitting cross-legged, still calm, still trusting. He tucked the photo back in the envelope before she could ask. "It's nothing important," he said gently. "Just mail from the shelter. Probably a mistake." But Cole didn't buy it. He was by Nolan's feet now, staring up at him with those hard gold eyes. He hadn't growled again, hadn't moved, but his body buzzed with tension. Something inside him knew. That night, Nolan sat on the edge of the couch long after Elise went to bed. The photograph lay on the coffee table. He stared at it like it might rearrange itself if he waited long enough. He picked up his laptop and typed the words slowly. "Paramilitary, insignia, winged badge, private contractors with dog training units." Page after page flashed by. Most were irrelevant. Security firms, old news reports, war zone deployments. But one article buried deep caught his eye. Illegal dogfighting ring busted in Arizona desert, ties to former private security company suspected. Nolan clicked. The article was 4 years old. The details were vague, jurisdictional disputes, missing files, but it mentioned confiscated animals. Several dogs, most severely injured, were rescued from the site. Some bore evidence of advanced tactical training. Others had clearly been used in violent containment or intimidation scenarios. His pulse spiked. He scrolled to the bottom. No names, no photos. Just one brief line. Several of the rescued dogs were placed in shelters out of state due to concerns of retaliation from parties still under investigation. And in that moment, it all aligned. Cole wasn't just traumatized, he was trained. Trained to guard, trained to respond, trained to survive. And now perhaps trained to protect Elise, not just because he loved her, but because someone might be coming to take him back. The following day, Nolan kept Elise home from school. He didn't say why. He just told her they needed a day together, maybe a movie or baking or puzzles. She smiled and asked if Cole could help decorate cookies. He said of course. By mid-afternoon, Cole hadn't left her side once. He flinched at every truck that drove past. His body was always angled between her and the nearest exit. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the shadows turned long and uncertain, Nolan finally called the shelter. "I need to talk to whoever handled Cole's intake," he said. "Anything off the record. I just need to know who dropped him off, or who might have been watching." The voice on the other end paused. "That file's sealed." "Why?" "Because a man came in 3 days after Cole arrived claiming to be his handler. Said he worked security and wanted the dog back. But when we asked for ID, he got aggressive, threatened legal action, then disappeared." Nolan's throat tightened. "Why didn't you tell us?" "Because Cole wouldn't go near him," he snarled, teeth bared, full on attack stance, and the man smiled when it happened. Like it proved something. Nolan hung up the phone without another word. That night he slept with the lights on, a baseball bat beside the bed, and the envelope tucked in his drawer, just beneath the paperwork that declared Cole theirs legally, fully, finally. But even legal papers couldn't erase the feeling that somewhere out there someone hadn't let go. And Cole knew. Because by midnight he was sitting at the foot of Elise's bed again, watching the window. Waiting. The night was silent in that uneasy way that never feels natural. No wind, no creaking pipes, just the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the low, restless breaths of a dog who hadn't slept in hours. Cole hadn't moved from his post by Elise's bed. He sat rigid, muscles taut beneath his coat, eyes locked on the window as if he could will whatever was coming to stay away. Elise lay curled beneath her blanket, her hand resting on his back like an anchor in a current no one else could see. She hadn't spoken in a while, not since dinner, but her body seemed to know what her voice didn't need to say. She was afraid. Nolan hadn't told her everything. He couldn't. She was still a child, even if her calm sometimes felt older than his own. But he'd sensed it, the shift in her. She'd stopped singing to herself, stopped playing her music box, and Cole, her constant shadow, had become something else entirely. A sentinel, a warning, a weapon waiting to be used. Nolan's phone buzzed just after midnight, an unknown number. He stared at it for a moment too long before answering. "Hello." The voice was low, flat. It had no accent, no urgency, just intent. You have something that belongs to us. Nolan's grip tightened on the phone. He's not yours. You don't know what he's trained for. You don't understand the kind of damage he can do. He's not a weapon. He was, and he can be again. Then, silence. The line went dead. Nolan lowered the phone slowly, his mind racing. He checked the locks again, closed the blinds, moved Elise's backpack to block the small window in the laundry room. It all felt like trying to seal a house with paper and hope. But Cole hadn't barked, not once. He just stayed where he was, alert, waiting. He seemed to know the call wasn't the threat, just a signal that the real thing was getting closer. The following morning brought no comfort. The sky stayed low and gray, heavy with unfallen rain. Elise wandered through the house with a strange quiet to her steps, one hand dragging along the wall as she moved, the other always close to Cole's fur. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. But when she sat at the kitchen table, and Nolan placed a plate in front of her, she spoke. They're coming for him, aren't they? Nolan froze. Why would you say that? I heard the phone. And Cole ... He won't eat, he won't sleep, he only watches. He knows something bad is near. Nolan knelt beside her. Elise, listen to me. We're not going to let anyone take him. He's safe with us. You're safe. She nodded, but her expression didn't change. You don't have to lie, Dad, I already know. And that was when the first car showed up. It didn't stop in front of the house. It parked 2 blocks down, near the intersection where the tree had been cut back last winter. A black SUV, windows tinted. No plates. No one got out. It just sat there, engine off, perfectly still. Cole stood by the window for an hour without flinching. Nolan called the police, gave the description, asked for a patrol car to drive by. 20 minutes later, one did. The SUV was gone by then. It returned. Later that night. The next day, Nolan bought a security camera and installed it above the porch. Then another one above the back door. He didn't tell Elise, but she heard the drills and knew. She didn't ask for reassurance. She didn't ask for anything. She just asked if Cole could sleep beside her again. This time, with the door wide open. That night, it happened. Around 2:18 a.m., the porch camera blinked offline. Nolan's phone lit up with the alert, but before he could check it, Cole was already growling, low, steady, deep enough to vibrate through the walls. Nolan grabbed the bat. He didn't need to check the window. He already knew. Someone was outside. He crept down the hallway. The front lock was untouched, deadbolt still in place. But the back door, Cole reached it first. He didn't bark. He didn't lunge. He simply stood, head low, tail stiff, body aligned with the door like he'd done this exact thing in a past life. Then tap. Not a knock. A tap. 3. Just like the envelope. Nolan flinched. Then a voice, muffled through the door. Calm, unshaken. You think this dog loves you. He was trained to obey. All it takes is the right command. Cole's head jerked slightly. Nolan stepped closer, heart hammering. You stay away from my family. Ask him what Delta 9 means. See what happens. Then footsteps. Fading. Cole didn't move, but he was shaking. Nolan closed the door and double-locked it. The sound of his own heartbeat thundered in his ears. He turned to Cole. Delta 9, he whispered, unsure if he was afraid or desperate. Cole's eyes snapped to him. In a second, his body shifted. Every muscle drew tight. He moved into a stance Nolan had never seen before, low, ready, waiting for a target. It was like flipping a switch. Cole, Nolan said, voice trembling, stand down, that's enough. But Cole didn't break the stance until a voice floated down the hallway. Cole, come here, boy, Elise. And just like that, he moved, not like a soldier, like a dog. Her dog. He trotted past Nolan, tail relaxed, head low. He pressed his nose to her palm like nothing had happened. Elise knelt and wrapped her arms around his neck. He's not theirs anymore, she whispered. He just needed someone to remind him. Nolan stared at them, the blind girl and the dog trained to be something monstrous, and realized the unthinkable had happened. She had untrained him. She hadn't just saved him. She'd rewritten him, but they weren't safe. Not yet. Whoever was out there still believed Cole belonged to them, and this time they weren't going to knock. The wind had returned, stronger now, not howling, not wild, but determined. It swept through the trees behind the house in steady waves, like the earth itself was holding its breath. Nolan didn't sleep that night. He stayed in the living room with the lights off, the baseball bat resting against his knee, the security monitors flickering faintly in the dark. On screen, nothing moved, no figures, no cars, just shadows that never quite settled. Cole lay beside Elise's bed, eyes open, ears up. He hadn't returned to full alert, not since Elise whispered to him the night before, but he was still waiting, not out of fear, out of purpose, like he knew this was the final stretch. By morning, Nolan had made his decision. He packed the car with just enough clothes, medicine, food, Elise's music box and Cole's leash, though they hadn't needed it in days. Elise didn't ask questions as he guided her to the car. She'd already sensed the shift. She could feel it in her father's hands and hear it in cold silence. We're not running, Nolan said gently as he started the engine. We're moving toward something safer. Elise nodded once. I know. They drove west, cutting through flat country and dusty hills. Nolan didn't have a destination, not at first, just the need to put distance between them and whatever. Shadow had started circling their home, but after the third day, he began to find clarity in the quiet stretches of highway. Cole no longer sat tensely in the back seat. His body had relaxed. His gaze was softer, and Elise had started humming again the old lullaby from her broken music box. Only this time, the melody was steady, clear. By the end of the week, they reached the mountains. Nolan found a cabin, a small wood-framed place tucked beside a slow creek and half-ringed by pines. It wasn't much, but it had a fireplace, thick walls, and a porch that faced the sunrise. It felt like a beginning, not an escape. They settled in with surprising ease. Mornings were quiet. Elise would sit by the window with her books, running her fingers across the pages while Cole dozed beside her, sometimes lifting his head at the sound of birds or distant wind. Nolan took to chopping wood, brewing tea, fixing things he hadn't known he could repair. For the first time in years, the silence between them was warm, but peace is never without its final test. It came one morning in the form of a man walking up the trail, not fast, not aggressive, just walking, as if he belonged there. Nolan saw him first. Cole sensed him second. Elise was already turning toward the door before either of them spoke. Stay here, Nolan whispered, placing a hand on Cole's back. The dog didn't move, didn't even growl. His eyes simply followed Nolan as he stepped outside. The man stopped a dozen feet away. He wore plain clothes, no insignia, but Nolan recognized the posture, the way his feet planted, the way his hands never drifted far from his jacket. You don't need to be here, Nolan said, keeping his voice even. The man tilted his head. I just came to look him in the eye. One last time. Nolan stepped forward. He's not yours anymore. You know that. I trained that animal for 2 years, the man replied, not with anger but something colder. He was the best. And then he broke. He didn't break, Nolan said. You did. You turned him into something he was never supposed to be. The man's gaze shifted, not to Nolan but over his shoulder. Cole had stepped outside. He walked past Nolan, slow and calm, and stopped just a few feet from the man. Not stiff, not threatening, just ... present. The man lowered his eyes. For a second, just a second, something flickered across his face. Regret, maybe, or memory. What had passed. He won't follow you, Elise said from the doorway, her voice clear and unshaken. The man looked at her. You don't know what he's capable of. I know exactly what he's capable of, she replied. He listens. When I speak, he lies next to me when I cry. He keeps the monsters away, but not because he was trained to. The man said nothing. Cole took one step forward, then sat. It wasn't a challenge, it was a goodbye. The man turned without another word and walked back down the trail, slower than before. Nolan watched until the last glimpse of his coat disappeared behind the trees. Cole didn't move for a long while. Then, gently, he turned and walked back to Elise. That night, they sat on the porch as the wind began to die down. Elise leaned into her father's shoulder, Cole resting at her feet. The stars above them blinked slowly into view. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called once, then fell silent again. Do you think he'll come back? Elise asked quietly. Nolan shook his head. No, he saw the truth. What truth? That Cole chose you. Elise smiled softly. I think we chose each other. The fire crackled beside them. Cole shifted closer, his head resting gently on Elise's knee. His eyes were closed now. For the first time since they brought him home, he was truly at rest. He wasn't a weapon anymore. He wasn't a shadow of what had been done to him. He was hers. And in the vast quiet of that mountain night, that single truth became all the safety they would ever need.